The courtroom was quiet that morning, the kind of quiet that holds its breath. People sat waiting for their names to be called, some tapping their feet, some anxiously holding paperwork, others staring down at the floor, already embarrassed by the fines they came to face. But then, the door opened slowly. A man stepped inside, not dressed like everyone else, not confident, not hurried. His clothes were worn, the kind of worn that comes from years, not weeks. His jacket, once thick, now hung loose on a body that had grown thinner from struggle. His hair was uncombed, his beard a little overgrown, and his shoes, if you could still call them shoes, were frayed at the edges, soles nearly separating. His name was Michael. He didn't walk in with arrogance. He didn't walk in with excuses. He walked in with the quiet weight of someone who had learned to expect very little from the world. When Michael reached the stand, he didn't look up immediately. He stood there, hands folded, heart racing, the way a man looks when life has given him more battles than victories. The clerk read his case aloud. Failure to pay parking fines. Total amount owed, $335. A few people in the courtroom sighed, irritated. Some whispered. Others rolled their eyes. Just another case, they thought. But Judge Frank Caprio watched the man carefully. Something about him felt different. Not the fines, not the offense, but the look in his eyes, a quiet exhaustion, the kind that comes from surviving every day, not living it. Judge Caprio leaned forward. Sir, would you like to say anything regarding these fines? Michael swallowed hard. His voice wavered, not from guilt, but from hunger, from cold, from being tired of explaining himself. Your Honor, I'm homeless. I've been trying to find work. I haven't had a steady meal in days. I sleep by the bus station. I didn't ignore the tickets. I just couldn't move the car. I couldn't fix it. I couldn't afford anything. The room fell silent. This wasn't a criminal. This wasn't a rebel ignoring laws. This was a man fighting to stay alive, and in that moment, no one knew what Judge Caprio would do next. But what he said would shock every single person in that courtroom. The courtroom continued to watch Michael, but not in the loud, judgmental way people usually stare. It became a quieter observation, the kind that happens when hearts begin to shift. Judge Caprio sat back slightly, taking in every detail before speaking. His voice was calm. Michael, how long have you been without stable housing? Michael rubbed the back of his neck in a small gesture, but one that revealed everything. Discomfort, shame, the heaviness of remembering. It's been a little over a year, Your Honor. The judge nodded slowly. What happened? Tell me in your own words. Michael didn't rush. He didn't dramatize. He didn't try to make his story sound tragic. He simply told the truth. The kind of truth that you don't rehearse because you lived it. I used to work at a small manufacturing shop just outside the city. I was there for almost 8 years. I showed up every day, never missed a shift. He paused, breathing through the memory. Then, my mother got sick. I took time off to take care of her. It was just me and her. No one else in the family. He swallowed hard, eyes fixed on the floor. She passed away last winter. I lost the job not long after. I started selling my things, then my place, until it was just me and my car. I tried to keep things together, but he looked up for the first time, eyes tired. When the car broke down, I couldn't pay to fix it. I couldn't move it. The tickets kept coming. He didn't say it seeking pity. He said it because it was simply what had happened. The prosecutor, usually stern, slowly lowered her gaze. Judge Caprio listened, not as an authority figure, but as a human being. He asked softly, "Do you have any family left? Anyone who can help?" Michael shook his head. "No, sir. It's just me now." There are moments in life when a room full of strangers becomes connected by a single thread. Empathy. This was one of those moments. The courtroom wasn't thinking about fines or laws anymore. They were thinking about something deeper. How close anyone could be to the same fate. Because life does not announce when it will break. One medical emergency. One job lost. One family tragedy. And the ground beneath your feet can disappear overnight. Judge Caprio took a slow breath. His voice was respectful, steady. You know, Michael, sometimes life can be incredibly unfair, and it often feels like it all happens at once. Michael nodded, his voice barely above a whisper. Yes, Your Honor. I'm trying. I really am. No excuses. No anger. Just effort. Just survival. The judge folded his hands together. You came here today knowing you could be fined, even jailed for non-payment, but you still came? Michael nodded again. I believe in doing what's right, even when it's hard. The courtroom was silent, not because there was nothing to say, but because everything that needed to be understood had already been said. But the real turning point, the moment no one would ever forget, was only just beginning. A faint cough echoed from the back of the courtroom, the kind of small sound that breaks a silence that has grown too heavy. Judge Caprio glanced at the paperwork in front of him. It was a stack of violation notices, each one stamped, processed, and sealed like an unfeeling machine. Total fines, 335, he repeated quietly. But this time the numbers didn't sound like a bill. They sounded like a wall, one that Michael could never climb. The prosecutor shifted, preparing to speak. Your Honor, while we sympathize with the defendant's situation, Judge Caprio raised a hand gently, still looking at Michael. I understand, he said, not dismissing her, not ignoring her, just holding the moment. He then turned his full attention back to Michael. Michael, when your vehicle received these tickets, did you make any attempt to address them? Michael nodded, not proudly but honestly. Yes, Your Honor, I did. I came here once before, but I couldn't stay for the hearing. I hadn't slept in 2 days. I fainted in the hallway, and when I woke up, everyone had gone. A few gasps rippled across the courtroom. This was not someone running from responsibility. This was someone life had tried to break again and again. Judge Caprio asked, and since then? I tried to get work. Any work, washing dishes, sweeping floors, but without an address, without clean clothes. He shook his head. Sometimes people don't see a person. They just see a burden. His voice cracked. Not dramatic, not loud, just real. The prosecutor's stern facade softened. Even the officer standing near the wall shifted his posture, discomforted by the truth in the air. Judge Caprio leaned forward, elbows resting on the desk. Michael, I want to ask you something, and I want you to answer honestly. Michael lifted his eyes. Are you trying to change your situation? There was no hesitation. Yes, Your Honor, every day, not a speech, not a performance. Just a sentence that carried every sunrise he had struggled through. Judge Caprio looked at him for a long moment. It was the kind of look that sees past clothes, past dirt, past circumstance. A look that sees a human being, but then the formality of the courtroom returned. Protocol demanded input. The prosecutor cleared her throat softly. Your Honor, the state's recommendation, as always in these cases, is to uphold the required fine. The law is consistent for everyone. The phrase echoed, the law is the law. But what happens when the law meets reality? Judge Caprio slowly lifted the stack of papers, the printed fines, the color photographs of the broken-down car, the citations that had been mailed to an address that no longer existed. He held the papers gently, as if their weight was heavier than paper should be. Michael, he said quietly, life has not been kind to you lately. Michael didn't speak, he couldn't. His throat tightened, and then the courtroom braced because this was the moment. The point where judgment can rise, or mercy can shine, what Judge Caprio chose next. No one was prepared for. The air inside the courtroom felt different now. Not tense, not chaotic, just still, as if everyone was waiting for something important, something that needed to be said with care. Judge Caprio set the paperwork down gently, like he was placing something fragile on the table. Michael, he began softly, I want you to understand something. The purpose of this courtroom is not to punish people for falling. It's to help them stand back up. Michael's lips parted slightly, surprised, not by kindness but by being seen. The judge continued, his voice steady. You didn't ignore these fines out of disrespect. You didn't run from this situation. You showed up today knowing that you could face consequences. Michael nodded silently. That speaks to your character, Judge Caprio added. A man who has nothing but still chooses honesty is not a man we throw away. A few people in the gallery blinked back tears. Someone in the back whispered, God bless him. The prosecutor lowered her gaze. Whatever argument she had prepared no longer felt needed or even appropriate. Michael's eyes glistened. He tried to blink the tears away, wiping his face with the sleeve of his worn jacket. I'm just trying to make it to tomorrow, he whispered. Judge Caprio gave a small nod, a gesture that held more understanding than any speech could. Of course you are, he replied, and that takes strength. More than most people realize. For a moment silence returned, but this silence felt warm, not cold. A silence of respect. Then Judge Caprio leaned back and asked gently, "When was your last proper meal, Michael?" Michael hesitated, and embarrassment flickering across his face. "A couple days ago, Your Honor. I've had some crackers since then." A woman in the courtroom covered her mouth. Another shook her head slowly, unable to believe someone standing right in front of them was starving. Judge Caprio turned to his assistant. "Can we arrange something for him to eat today?" His assistant nodded immediately. "Yes, Your Honor." Michael's composure cracked just a little. "Thank you. I don't want to be a burden," he said quietly. Judge Caprio leaned forward again. "Listen to me," he said, voice gentle but firm. "Asking for help does not make you a burden. It makes you human, and there is no shame in being human." Michael looked down, this time, not in shame but to hide the emotion rising in him. The judge paused, letting the moment breathe. Then he said something that shifted the entire room. "I cannot, in good conscience, add to a weight you're already struggling to carry." The courtroom stilled. No one coughed. No one whispered. No one moved. Michael's chest tightened. He didn't dare assume what that meant. Judge Caprio looked at him with warmth, the kind of warmth people forget exists in the world. "Michael, we're going to figure this out." The decision had not yet been spoken, but everyone could feel it forming, like dawn before the sun breaks the horizon. And what came next would change not only Michael's day, but his direction in life. Judge Caprio took a moment before speaking, not because he was unsure, but because some decisions deserve stillness. His eyes remained on Michael, studying the exhaustion, the humility, the quiet dignity. "Michael," he began, his tone slow and deliberate, "when the law is applied without understanding, it becomes punishment. And justice is not meant to punish those who are already suffering. It is meant to guide and protect." Michael swallowed hard, unsure if he was hearing what he hoped to hear. Judge Caprio continued, "These fines were not the result of disregard. They were the result of circumstances you could not prevent. A broken car, a broken life situation, a man trying to hold on to the last little bit he had." He tapped the stack of papers, lightly, as if acknowledging the system itself. "So, here is what I'm going to do." The room leaned forward as one. "I am going to dismiss the entire $335 fine." There was an audible gasp. Not dramatic, just human. Michael blinked once, twice, as if the words had trouble landing. His lips parted, but no sound came out. The judge didn't look triumphant. He simply looked calm. "You owe nothing," he said gently. "You are free from these fines." Michael's hands trembled. His breath hitched. For a second he tried to speak and to say thank you, but his voice broke under the weight of relief. He covered his eyes with his sleeve, overwhelmed. Some people in the courtroom looked away, not out of discomfort, but because witnessing another person's vulnerability so intimately can feel sacred. But Judge Caprio was not finished. He turned to his clerk. "Please connect Michael with Shelter Assistance Services. And make sure he receives a meal today. A full one. Not something small." The clerk nodded instantly, already wiping her eyes. And then the judge said something that would stay with everyone in that room. "This courtroom is not just a place for the law. It is a place for people. Real people. And sometimes the most lawful thing we can do is to show humanity." Michael finally lowered his hands. His eyes were red, but there was a light in them now. Small, fragile, but unmistakably hope. "Your Honor," he said softly, voice shaking. I don't know how to thank you." Judge Caprio smiled, with a gentle, fatherly kind of smile. "You just did," he replied, "by not giving up on yourself. Keep trying. That is all I ask." Michael nodded, pressing his hand to his chest, as if trying to steady a heart that had forgotten what kindness felt like. When he turned to leave, he did not walk the same way he walked in. He stood a little taller, His steps were a little more sure. A man who came in broken, walked out with a chance, and the room he left behind was filled with something rare. Not pity. Not sympathy, but respect, for him, and for the judge who chose compassion over cold routine. Michael stepped away from the bench slowly, almost unsure if his feet would carry him. For so long, the world had felt like a locked door. Now, for the first time in a long time, it felt like someone had opened one for him. The courtroom was silent as he walked. Not a silence of judgment, but of respect. A woman in the audience stood up and quietly handed him a small paper bag. "There's a sandwich and some fruit in here," she whispered. Michael hesitated, then accepted it with a shaky thank you. People who had moments earlier been strangers were now witnesses to a turning point in his life, and maybe even small participants in it. Judge Caprio watched all of this. Not proudly, not seeking applause, just making sure Michael was okay. When Michael finally reached the exit, he paused and turned back, meeting the judge's eyes one last time. He didn't speak. The emotion in his expression said everything words could not. The door closed softly behind him. The judge let out a quiet breath. Not of relief, but of reflection. Because cases like Michael's do not leave the room when the person leaves. They stay. They remind everyone that justice is not just something printed in law books. It is something lived. The prosecutor adjusted her files but didn't speak. Her usual strict posture softened. The officer near the wall shifted, looking at the ground. Even the clerk, who processed hundreds of cases a week, dabbed her eyes. It wasn't the dismissal of the fine that moved them. It was the reminder, people break. But they also heal. And sometimes they just need one hand reaching out. Judge Caprio glanced down at his docket. Dozens more names remained. Each one with a story, each one carrying their own unseen burdens. But for a moment, the rhythm of the courtroom paused. One of the court staff leaned in and spoke softly. "You know, Judge, you didn't just clear a fine today. You gave that man back a piece of his life." Caprio didn't smile. He didn't make a speech. He just nodded, because to him this wasn't heroism. It was responsibility. "Everyone deserves a chance," he murmured. The staff member nodded back. "Not everyone believes that." Judge Caprio looked at the courtroom door, the one Michael had just walked through. That's why someone needs to. There was nothing loud or dramatic about the moment. No applause. No grand gesture. Just quiet truth. A man walked in believing the world had no room for him. He walked out with a second chance, and that was enough. The story of Michael did not end when he left the courtroom that day. Because sometimes the most meaningful changes begin quietly, not with applause, not with celebration, but with a shift inside the heart. People who watched the hearing later said they couldn't stop thinking about it. Not because of the legal outcome, but because of what it revealed, how little we truly know about the battles others are fighting. A man who looked tired and worn wasn't irresponsible. He wasn't lazy. He wasn't careless. He was someone who had loved his mother so deeply that he sacrificed everything to care for her. And when life collapsed around him, he didn't become bitter. He didn't blame the world. He kept trying. The courtroom didn't see a criminal that day. They saw a man who had been carrying pain by himself for far too long, and Judge Caprio reminded everyone watching, inside the room and across the world, that justice is not just the letter of the law. True justice is recognizing when someone needs compassion more than punishment. Sometimes the kindest thing you can give someone isn't money. It isn't advice. It isn't a lecture, it's simply dignity. To look at them and say, "I see you. I hear you. Your life matters too." That is the kind of respect that can rebuild a person from the inside out. Michael walked into that courtroom believing the world had forgotten him. He walked out knowing someone cared, and when a person learns that they are worth something, even a little, everything changes. Maybe that's the real lesson here. Compassion can save a life long before hunger or cold ever do. So the next time you pass someone struggling, sleeping outside, asking for change, talking to themselves on a street corner, pause before you judge. You don't know their story. You don't know the losses they've endured. You don't know the battles they survived just to stay alive. Kindness costs nothing, but to someone who has nothing, it can mean everything. Now I want to ask you something. If you believe kindness is strength, If you believe compassion is power, if you believe every life has value, then type humanity in the comments. And tell me where you're watching from. I want to thank every good heart no matter how near or how far. Your presence here means you still believe in a gentler world, and that matters. Thank you for listening. Thank you for caring. And above all, thank you for choosing humanity today.